What moment in your life can you look at and say, that's when everything changed? Several years ago, when I watched my mother finally crack. She'd generally wear her heart on her sleeve, but her default mode was happy. Granted, she was no son when we emigrated out of Asia. She still isn't. But it's tough raising 2 kids in a foreign environment. All her focus was on us. What little money she had went towards our tuition and nice things that we just had to have because everyone else has one. By my words. She ended up with no money for her parents' funerals, nor for her little brothers, as she couldn't physically be there to care for her ill family back home. She worked twice as hard for us. I was far too selfish to see this. Then one day I got into an argument with her. I can't even remember what it was about. She just cracked. She tore apart her traditional clothing with garden shears, screaming how she didn't need that part of her anymore. Sat down and wept. It's crazy how clear my mind was at that moment. I realized 101 things about her at once. Knowing that there was a terrified woman behind that brave facade all those years made me see her as a person who had grown with me. She was traveling some distance herself while holding my hand through my life. She was my friend, and I had done nothing for her. That clarity hurt like heck. I had always loved her, but now she is the dearest friend I have. The morning my husband died, when the EMTs came down from our bedroom to tell me that he was dead, I had this terribly bleak thought of how irreparably changed my life would be from that point forward. Then I just got down to it, picked up the pieces, and got my new life into order. But it literally changed everything. I'm sorry for your loss. I lost my husband on the 4th of April. It was very sudden. His death most definitely changed everything. I was 17, second day of senior year. I hadn't seen my parents in a few days. They were off on a trip for my mom's birthday. I wake up a few hours late for school, only to hear the police banging on my door. We lived in a decent middle-class house, white Indian neighborhood, and the cops never bothered us. Except that day they politely came in, sat me down and told me both my parents died in a plane crash on their way back home. Stupidly, neither of them left any form of will or last wishes behind. So anyway, a year and a half later, here I am, living on my own way before I intended to with real responsibilities. It blows. One morning when I was around 12, I arrived into the classroom to find that 2 girls that I had teamed up with to bully a fellow student had decided that I was no longer of interest to them, and they would now bully me. This took me by surprise, and suddenly I had nowhere to sit in class. The girl that we had been bullying smiles at me and pulled out the chair next to her. I sat in it, and we ended up becoming best friends. I don't even see her anymore. Haven't since college, but everything good that has happened to me since can be traced back to that moment. Working as the lone night attendant in an old school mental asylum, and a patient, a prominent businessman from a small Midwestern town, shuffled out of his room, unable to sleep. He sat quietly for a while, then looked at me and said, "You hippies think that hallucinations are pretty colors and paisley patterns on the wall. But wait until someone knocks on your door in the middle of the night and convinces you that the most logical thing to do is immediately leave your house and your beautiful wife and wonderful kids and walk down the main street of your town, completely naked. Now that is hallucinating." Mental health needs to be taken just as seriously as physical health. Was paid insanely huge amount of money for the first job I ever had. Never gonna quit this job. Fisherman in Norway. You can only imagine. Norwegian salmon farmer here. High five. When I saw myself in the mirror and thought to myself, dang, you really let yourself go. 100 pounds down and like 10 go. It was a hard fight, but worth every ounce of effort. The benefits to losing weight are so much more than merely to your health. You unleash the child in you again. Newfound confidence, a sense of adventure to try new things, and the positive mindset that you can do it if you put your mind to it, because you already have done. Hope you reach your desired weight, my friend. When my dad died, the day after I turned 21, I watched cancer eat a hole through his freaking neck. Don't freaking smoke. If you do, quit. Just threw my cigars in the trash. That was so simple, it kinda took it home for me. I don't want my kids to see their father die like that. I drank a lot. You couldn't hang out with me at night unless we were getting s-faced. I didn't drink for fun or to be social. I drank to get drunk. One night it was finally too much for my then so she recorded the terrible things I said and did. I always blacked out so had no memory of any of it. When I heard everything, I finally realized that I have a problem. I went to an AA meeting that day, the 15th of July, 2008 and have remained sober since. Glad you got sober. Alcoholics are so often in denial and it's hard on the people close to them who end up having to do things like your so did. Record, remember, analyze, confront etc. Basically being the boss in order to teach someone to be their own boss. I had an extremely abusive, alcoholic father. One night after he best the crap out of me and he passed out next to his bed, I went downstairs in the kitchen and told my mom it was finally time we left. I was around 11 at the time and she agreed with me so we left. I'm 28 now and that's when everything changed for the better for us. At age 13, I developed a horrifying skin infection that left thick, crusty scabs all over my entire face. The infection lasted for months and months, and at some point, I decided that I was going to be ugly forever. Every morning I would wake up and hope that the scabs would be gone, that I'd wake up and be able to touch my face without wincing. That never happened of course, oftentimes the opposite was true. The infection would spread a little more every day. People would stare everywhere I went. Sometimes they'd ask questions, but most of the time they would look at me with an expression of pity or disgust. I realized that even if the scabs faded, I'd be horribly disfigured with scars. The scabs were thick, and they were deeply implanted in my skin. They were so deep that picking them out would have left me with profusely bleeding facial wounds. I was miserable and hopeless, and I spent every night of my 8th grade year crying myself to sleep. Somewhere down the line, I was sitting in the shower, just thinking. I spent a lot of time in the shower during the infection. It was the only time I felt truly clean. The water had a way of purifying me and abating my deep depression. I was running my fingers across the dry, cracked scabs on my face, and one of them slid off. I started rubbing my face some more, sort of in a daze. One by one, these thick scabs that had plagued me for months began sliding off, until I was left with a face full of smooth, albeit red, skin. Months passed, and then years, and now I'm left with a face that is very scarred, but also very attractive. I'm happy, maybe even the happiest person I know. The scars don't look bad, and I love the way my face looks. I still think back to that day in the shower all the time. It's amazing how quickly depression can fade once the source of it has disappeared. Mine would have to be 7:34 Friday the 20th of September 2013. After waiting for nearly 7 months, my husband got the call for a double lung transplant. He has cystic fibrosis and had quickly been deteriorating. He had spent 3 weeks prior to his surgery in an ICU fighting for his life. He received a double lung transplant on the 21st thanks to our donor and their family. My first wife had CF and died 9 months after we were married. Back then, lung transplants weren't even thought of as a treatment and most CF kids died before they turned 18. I'm so happy to read about your husband and so many others that are living longer and somewhat healthier lives due to the advancements they've made. Congrats. The 13th of April, 1983. I was 6 years old. I was in our backyard playing and found a turtle. I took the turtle to the front yard because I had a box to put it in. While I was playing outside, my 18-month-old sister wandered into the backyard unsupervised and fell into our pool and drowned, resulting in her being in a coma for the next 20 years. While in the hospital with my little sister, my mom cut her ankle on a rocking chair and it became infected. She died on Labor Day, 1983. My father remarried to the most evil woman the following June, 1984. She was abusive to all of us and made the next 10 years horrible until they divorced. By the time they divorced, my dad was in debt to just about everyone and the IRS was breathing down his neck for back taxes, resulting in him spending some time at a federal prison camp. I wish I was making this up and things are better now, but I often wonder what would have happened if I had not found that turtle and stayed in the backyard. It was a horrible accident and blaming myself or anyone won't change things, but I know that my childhood ended that day and things would have been different had that one event never occurred. Jesus Christ, man. I can't even begin to understand any feeling you may have. I'm sorry you had to go through all of that. Sophomore year of college. I'm walking towards my dorm and these two girls who I had only met once before and who also live in my dorm are walking by. They stop me and just go, "We're going to be friends." And we did, and they were basically my first real friends at college, and it started my rise out of depression. You are one lucky person. I've been so depressed during college because I feel like I haven't made enough of an effort to make friends. The day I found my boyfriend after he committed suicide, I have never been the same. It was 2 years ago. Don't really know who I am yet, but I'm not the person I was before. So sorry for you. Hope you're doing well under the circumstances. When I met my wife, she's been my best friend pretty much since the day we met. She helped me figure out my life during a time in college where I had no vision or drive. Most of the good qualities I have as a person I've learned from her. Midwestern values. She's showed me how to properly communicate with people. She's been pivotal in developing my amazing career. She's the best thing that's ever happened to me. I'm sure she knows it, but dang it, I'm going to buy her flowers tonight on my way home from work and tell her. Some weirdo decided she wanted to marry me. Now I'm a lot more future thinking. I've never had a license, but I'm learning how to drive. Because what if there's an emergency? I'm learning how to purchase and maintain cars. I'm throwing all of my money at debt and investments, rather than hockey tickets and entrepreneurship. I'm going back to school to be a coder so that, with any luck, I'll always be useful in any economy. I'm dieting and exercising regularly to mitigate health problems down the line. It's been nice. It doesn't seem like one has to be a weirdo to marry you. Used to be involved in gangs, selling drugs, getting into fights. Chilled with a mate one day who was a pretty big dealer, feuding with the bikies as he was selling more than they were, when he told me something that changed my life. He told me that he did it as he had nothing to live for, no one there to guide him, so he grew up on the streets and that was all he knew. Whereas I had a family behind me that loved and cared for me, and that I had an education and should continue with my career, studying to be a doctor. That one conversation with him has changed my entire life. I stopped everything within a couple of months, hardly hang out with the bad crowd anymore, and turned my attention towards achieving my career. It's like the Good Will Hunting of drug dealing. I grew some balls and just said hi to her. What's the worst that could happen? 5 years later we couldn't be happier. The username works well with the opener of your comment. I was in my last year of medical school. I had just learned the week prior that I was to go to the Cleveland Clinic to train in anesthesiology. The next week I was in there and the doctor said, "It's cancer." That's when things changed for me. My cancer is metastatic and fairly aggressive, so I'm going to be on chemo for the rest of my life. I'll never be able to practice medicine. That's when things changed for me. Hugs. When in 2011, after 6 years, I deleted my World of Warcraft account. Nothing ever has transformed my daily routine, my whole life, that drastically. Honestly man, I played EQ2 for fricking ever, with over 365 days of in-game playtime. My life revolved around EverQuest. It took me losing the love of my life to quit, and nothing has been the same since. When I decided to browse RX Mormon for the first time, as I was really curious why people would leave the Mormon church, and now I know why. Well, I went through some racial riots in 1998. My entire family had to escape to a different country. I'd say that's a pretty big change. Makes great college application essays too. When I moved to another state with my boyfriend and said goodbye to my former life, 8 years later, I live in another country and I am married to that man. Pretty tame, but this is my tuppence worth. I went to a Butlins holiday camp, a UK holiday side company, and overheard Dr. Funner Kids Entertainer say I freaking hate kids. Somebody had smeared a blackjack sweet candy into his white trousers. I was about 7. I find it funny now, but when I think back, that's the point when I discovered that all is not what it seems. When my normal suburban family's life was turned upside down after we found out that my dad had been having an affair with a stripper for over a year. He had also bought a bar to cover up his affair, and he got a DUI and entered rehab shortly after being found out. That changed everything for my family and I, especially because my dad used to be my biggest hero. Warning. This is sad. My life changed the day my twins were born premature. My husband and I tried for over a year to conceive and finally got pregnant. We found out around 18 weeks that we were having twins. At 21 weeks I went to the doctor complaining of problems. She blew me off. At 24 weeks, I was in the hospital because my cervix opened and I was 2 centimeters dilated and my amniotic sac was bulging. After some tests, they determined that there was infection due to everything being open for so long. They decided to induce labor to prevent me from becoming septic. The first baby girl was born alive and the second baby girl was stillborn. The first baby girl lived for several hours but was too premature and medicine wasn't as advanced as it is now to save her. I now have 2 beautiful children who I adore, but my first 2 showed me how I can't control everything in my life and sometimes bad things happen to good people. I'm really sorry you lost them. When my best friend died at 15, I got depressed and didn't leave my room for 8 months. After that I found Reddit and improved myself since I realized life is short and there's nothing fair in the world. I started taking antidepressants, socializing, going to the gym and started dating again. And I owe most of it to Reddit. Sorry for the bad English. I am from Iraq. If you hadn't mentioned you were from Iraq, I wouldn't have picked up that English wasn't your first language just from this post. You have nothing to apologize. Also, congratulations on pulling yourself out of depression. During my second tour in Iraq we had a pretty massive car bomb go off at one of our checkpoints. I was put on the cleanup detail. Detail is an army term for job, and me and my buddy were given a group of 5 Iraqis that worked for us and a bunch of medical biohazard bags. My buddy and I walked around the area pointing out the arms, legs, skull fragments and unidentifiable clumps of former human that had been scattered about for our local nationals to pick up and put in the bags. At one point, he and I were laughing about some asinine bulls that we were talking about when I saw half of a dude's torso hanging from a tree. I hollered at one of the guys to go get it down. Then he looked at me right in the eyes with a pain I didn't know could exist, and I came from a broken, abusive, poor home. At that moment I realized what I had become. What we all had become. Guys that I would die for, literally acting like emotionless monsters. And I was right there with them. Since that day, I hate humanity. I hate what we do to each other and I hate how easily we can turn off the part of our brains that makes us feel when it becomes inconvenient to our conscious. I'm not the best with getting ideas out of my head and onto paper, so this doesn't exactly do justice to my feelings on the matter. But that was my moment when everything changed. I don't think you are a monster. The brain does its best to insulate us from the incomprehensible by making it something other than it really is. You just pass the limit on your coping mechanism. That's all. Please find a good therapist that can help you out. The day I kissed my best friend. Fast forward 6 years and him and I have bought a house, have 2 awesome doggies and 3 tortoises. That kiss was life changing. Be careful kids. Kissing may lead to having tortoises with the person you love. Breaking up with my GF of 5 years, I caught her cheating, but it actually made my life completely different. She never wanted to do anything, never worked a day we were together and was holding me back. I started working out, lost 90 pounds, started enjoying my job and the people I work with, even got a good raise. Found a wonderful GF who believes relationships are 50/50 and works. Got out of debt and overall just enjoying life much more now. I realize now I was in a dead-end relationship going nowhere, and separating from her solved almost all my problems. About 6 months ago I lost my home and everything I own in an apartment fire. I'm sure later on there will be things that are more important, but right now my life is either pre-fire or post-fire. I worked a service job and kept calling my boss and asking for advice on how to troubleshoot a piece of electronic equipment while in the field. After the 3rd call he said, "If I have to tell you how to fix it, why do I need you?" I hung up the phone, went into the bathroom, cried for a few minutes, then grew up. When I left the bathroom, I put all my education to work for the first time, fixed the problem, and have gone on to become well known for my tenacity and ability as a troubleshooter. I have made a good living over the past 20+ years as a result. There's a fight with my husband that I can point to as the moment I checked out of our marriage. May 2012. He'd been struggling with depression for years and I suspected he was bipolar as well. After losing a well-paying job in 2008 he just never got himself together. He spent 12-18 hours a day on a video game and ignoring all responsibility. We had a conversation in early 2012 where he promised to try. He promised not to fly off the handle, to rein in any unreasonable anger. It was hard for me to confront him, so it took months for me to sit him down and tell him that I needed this from him. I needed him to be kinder and better to me. Well, this fight was bad. He was cussing and screaming, flipping me off, in my face. And after I'd mustered up the courage to tell him how difficult it was for me when he was like that, I completely checked out that day. No more sex. No more pretending. I started cleaning out the garage and house, making plans to get my own place and imagining how we'd tell the kids. The night before I had a job interview, I got I guess it was a booty call from a girl I really liked, but it was late, and I had to be up at 6 the next day to get the bus across town for the interview. I had to turn her down. We spoke a few times after that, but nothing like that happened again. Had I taken her up on her offer and missed the interview, or just been too tired to make a good impression, I wouldn't have the job I have now but might be dating her. It's been like 8 years, and I love my job, but I still wonder. Any girl, or guy, for that matter, who can't respect your drive to be responsible over a quick tumble doesn't deserve you. Waiting for the next night wouldn't have been terrible. There are gaggles of people who would choose getting laid over virtually anything else, but people who are invested in stability are really special. The day I left for Afghanistan will forever be the most life-changing moment of my life. I can't even put into words here how different everything is now. Friends, relationships, medical issues. On Friday I had a severe accident. Car totaled. Can't remember much about what caused it. Still partially in shock. I needed to be cut out of the car. Ended up in hospital. No real injuries except from being sore all over and some whiplash. Insurance won't pay up for car. Long story. Ended up in massive amounts of debt. Will have to go to court. Lawyers' fees, loss of license, etc. My social life savings goals for the next 12 months are over. I'm at an all-time low. I've hit rock bottom. I've never been in this kind of trouble before. Here comes the epiphany. I'm 27 now. I never really grew up. I spend most of my time outside work getting high and drunk and trying to find hot girls to smash. That was it. This was my goal. Everything else was a way to acquire these things. I disrespected my family, did whatever I wanted to do and partied as hard as I could. Until this. Sitting in hospital, thinking I could have killed myself or another person. I realized that life isn't about money or girls or cars. Being a man doesn't mean that you have swagger or that people think you're cool. Being a man doesn't mean being CEO 10k a day. Being a man doesn't mean that you have value in a social setting. Your worth as a man is not defined by how many girls you slay or much material wealth you have attained. Being a man means you stay focused, take care of your crap and take care of your family. That's it. Nothing else matters. I'm depressed. Lost everything I had, but I've enrolled in university today. It took something like this to shake me up and realize what is actually important in life. I'm 26 and had a similar realization for myself, though not through as serious an occurrence as yours. As a fellow man who has found a true source of self-worth internally as opposed to externally, I say congratulations. It's always better when you know someone is on a similar path to being men. Gold for you. The day I met my best friend. It was in junior high and I was a pretty depressed kid. My mother being the type that was in and out of jail and no father. But that first day of homeroom when I asked her what book she was reading, Dragon's Milk, was one of the best days of my life. It was the first time I laughed so hard that I cried. From that day on she influenced the path my life took and is probably one of the main reasons I am the way I am today. I honestly look back on that day and go yup. If it wasn't for her I'd be a completely different person. When I was 8 years old and my mom called me and my brother into her room while she was doing her hair and makeup for the day and she told us she was divorcing our dad. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.